Let's jump right in. We all know the ancient Egypt of massive pyramids, golden pharaohs, and mummies, right? But underneath all that incredible architecture and royal bling, there was this invisible, deeply profound force driving literally everything they did. Today in this explainer, we're diving into a concept that was the absolute bedrock of ancient Egyptian life. It wasn't just some legal code, it was the actual fabric of the universe. And for everyone, from the most powerful pharaoh down to the humblest farmer, their eternal fate came down to one final, terrifying cosmic test. So, picture this. Your life has ended. You open your eyes and you're standing in the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. No peaceful clouds, no fiery pits. Instead, you're in a courtroom, the Hall of Two Truths. Right in the center is this massive golden scale. On one side goes your heart, which, remember, the Egyptians believed held your entire soul and all your memories. And on the other side, a single ostrich feather. Think about that for a second. If your soul was placed on that scale right now, carrying every action, every word, every thought you've ever had, would it be lighter than a feather?
Well, what's the deal with the feather, right? It's the symbol of Maat. And Maat wasn't just a word. It was the ultimate concept of truth, balance, law, morality, and justice. Usually personified as a young goddess with wings, or wearing that signature ostrich feather on her head, she literally was the divine order of the universe. The ancient Egyptians believed that at the exact moment of creation, Maat is what brought order out of primordial chaos. We're talking about a force that regulated the stars, the changing seasons, and the daily lives of humans and gods alike. Basically, to live a good life meant you were living in lockstep with Maat.
The mechanics of this trial were intense, overseen by none other than the jackal-headed god, Anubis. And it was a strictly binary verdict. If your heart balanced with the feather of Maat or was lighter, you were declared righteous. Boom, you passed through the gates of Aru, eternal paradise. But if your heart was weighed down by bad deeds, injustice, or cruelty, that scale tips. And waiting right there is a terrifying monster named Ammit. Ammit would devour your heavy heart right on the spot. No purgatory, no second chances, just instant eternal oblivion.
To really wrap our heads around Maat, we've got to look at its total opposite, which is Isfet. Where Maat is harmony, justice, and cosmic order, Isfet is chaos, injustice, violence, and evil. The Egyptians had this deeply held conviction that the universe was unified and holy, but also super fragile. They actually believed that tipping the scales toward Isfet didn't just mean society was acting badly, it meant the cosmos was literally breaking down. If a king was impious or someone committed a grave blasphemy, they thought it could cause the Nile to stop flooding, bring on devastating famines, or even strike someone blind. So maintaining harmony wasn't just some nice philosophical idea, it was literally a survival strategy.
Maat definitely wasn't some fleeting trend. It was a foundational pillar of the state for thousands of years. We first see it recorded as the ultimate standard for nature and society way back in the Old Kingdom, around 2375 BCE in the pyramid texts of Unas. Fast forward to the Middle Kingdom around 2060 BCE, and scribal schools are popping up, systematically teaching Maat to the intellectual elite. By the time we hit the New Kingdom, around 1569 BCE, pharaohs like Amenhotep III are building massive dedicated temples straight to the goddess Maat herself. It's an idea that outlasted entire empires.
So how does this grand cosmic philosophy actually play out on a random Tuesday afternoon in ancient Thebes? Well, Maat required concrete, righteous action. It basically meant the rich and powerful had a duty to protect the vulnerable, not exploit them. It was super common for tomb inscriptions to proudly boast things like, "I've given bread to the hungry and clothed the naked," or "I was a husband to the widow and father to the orphan." It was almost like an ancient social security system. Everyone, from the pharaoh who called himself the Lord of Maat, down to your everyday farmer, was expected to act honorably with their family, their community, the environment, and the gods.
You can really see this practical wisdom in the instruction of Ptahhotep, a famous piece of ancient wisdom literature. He wrote, "Maat is good and its worth is lasting. Wrongdoing has never yet brought its venture to port." The ancient Egyptians didn't treat truth as just a theoretical puzzle. To them, it was the only practical, indestructible way to live. Ptahhotep was basically warning that, yeah, you might get rich quick through shady means, but truth is what actually lasts. It was seen as the ultimate long-term investment strategy for both your soul and society as a whole.
Now, keeping this delicate balance of truth and order wasn't easy. It required a very specific group of people, the sesh. These were the intellectuals, the bureaucrats, the scribes. Scribes held massive prestige. They weren't just taking notes. They were considered the living engines of Maat. They managed the tax collection, read and wrote letters for the illiterate majority, and importantly, they acted as a crucial buffer between the elites and the poor. In fact, their training manuals heavily emphasized that abusing power would be punished, which helped ensure that petitions from the most vulnerable folks actually made it to the desks of the higher-ups.
But becoming one of these protectors of truth? Not easy. Scribal schools were brutal. As young apprentices, we're talking sometimes just 5 years old, they first had to memorize and chant brief passages out loud. Once they had that down, step 2 was endlessly copying texts onto ostrich, which are basically just broken chunks of pottery or wooden tablets. Then finally, step 3, once the priestly instructors said they were ready, they tackled complex Middle Egyptian manuscripts. This whole education wasn't just about learning vocabulary, though. The entire time, they were being steeped in the moral and ethical values of Maat through the very texts they were writing.
What's absolutely fascinating is how these scribes applied those skills out in the real world. They didn't just write letters, they literally performed Maat through their rhetoric. See, in ancient Egypt, bluntly disagreeing with your boss was a huge social faux pas. It practically invited isfet, or chaos. So if a scribe needed to persuade a superior or settle a dispute, they crafted their words incredibly carefully to evoke Maat. They used persuasive language to smooth over egos and keep social harmony intact. To do Maat meant acting in a way that was totally beyond reproach. Words held immense power, and scribes were the masters of using them to keep the peace.
Okay, let's bring this full circle and head back into the shadows of the Duat. So, you've lived your life. You've done your best to feed the hungry, you've spoken with rhetorical grace. You're back in the Hall of Two Truths, waiting for Anubis to check those scales. But before that feather is even placed on the balance, there's one last, terrifying hurdle. You have to face the jury. And in the underworld, this is not a jury of your peers. It's a jury of gods, known as the assessors of Maat.
42. That is exactly how many deities are sitting on this jury. These 42 assessors of Maat represented the 42 united provinces or nomes of ancient Egypt. It was all about emphasizing the total unity of the nation. As a soul on trial, you had to stand before this massive, intimidating tribunal of 42 distinct gods and address every single one of them directly. You couldn't just give a blanket apology for your life. You had to go straight down the line, one by one, and prove your innocence to each specific judge.
And how exactly did you prove that innocence? Through a pretty amazing ritual called the negative confessions. The Papyrus of Ani is famous for recording this. Instead of listing all the great things you did, you had to explicitly declare the bad things you absolutely did not do. Just look at these standards for a virtuous life. For honesty, I have not stolen. Privacy, I have not been an eavesdropper. Kindness, I have made none to weep. And temperament, I have not been angry without just cause. It is a wild, moral checklist. You literally had to look 42 gods in the eye and state with total confidence that you didn't add to the world's chaos. But come on, let's be real. Nobody is perfect, right? Not even the ancient Egyptians. They totally knew that passing a flawless 42-point moral purity test was practically impossible. And that is exactly where the magic comes in. Wealthy Egyptians were actually entombed with personalized cheat sheets, spells from the Book of the Dead. These scrolls were packed with magical declarations designed to legally and supernaturally wipe your earthly misdeeds right off your afterlife record. By using the profound power of the written word, crafted by those highly trained scribes, a mistake you made in life could be magically voided, guaranteeing your ticket to paradise.
And that brings us to the end of our journey into the Duat. We've seen how the feather of Maat governed literally everything, from the rotation of the stars to the way a scribe talked to his boss, and ultimately whether a soul got eternal life or was eaten by Ammit. It really leaves us with a provocative question. If the assessors of Maat materialized right now, and those ancient golden scales were brought out to weigh the collective heart of our modern society, how would we measure up? Are we living by the feather, striving for cosmic balance and protecting the vulnerable, or have we let the chaos of Osfet tip the scales? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.